Very fancy, very fancy. Okay. Let me load this up. All right. Let's see. Okay, so I believe Kevin wants me to make sure that you guys sign in and all that jazz, but today we're going to be focusing on Figma and just building up our app essentially. I'll be teaching you a couple things about Figma shortcuts, features it has like components, auto layouts, and more. And we're gonna have some fun with it. if anyone's got questions, feel free to let me know. This will be my first time showing, so pretty much my first time. So if I mess up, feel free to bug me about it. Okay, so we're off to a great start on our Figma, but we're going to have to change a couple of things. So this looks great. This looks very great. Let me hide that real quick. I imported the photo from our dribble, just so it's easier to see on the Figma. While we're doing great here, I want to bring our focus to something. So here we're just manually filling in our button with the hex value of our color, which is great and it works. But if you're working on an actual design team, you don't want to do that. So there's something in Figma called color styles. So you can see if we go this button, it'll bring up the color styles tab. And you can see that there are some default colors, which you can disable in the library, but we won't have to worry about that for now. We're just going to create our own. So you click the create style button, which is just a plus in the top right, and it'll let you define it. So let's call it our primary color. And we'll go over this more. Let me know if the stream looks weird, because it says it's looking weird. Anyway. So, a couple of things about color palettes. So every app wants to have a few main colors. So if you go to twitter.com, you'll notice they're mostly blue, white, there's probably a couple other colors, but it's mostly blue and white. Our app seems to be focusing on a green with a white. So let's say our primary color here is green, because that's what our buttons are. And then our surface colors, such as our action bar, like a post right here has a white as its background. The aside card has white as its background. So our surface color for those cards are white, and then our primary color is green, and that shows up on our buttons, our logo, anywhere where we want like it to pop and for our viewers to see like, hey, this is something important. Look at this. So that we call that our primary color. And then, as you can assume, after primary there's secondary colors, tertiary, and also you can do a primary light and a primary dark, and you can add some effects to your colors, because say you're hovering over a button or you want to disable a button, you want to be able to manipulate the color a bit, and you don't want to just do disabled button. You want to do like primary disabled or primary hover. And there's a couple different options you can do there, but we'll get into that as it shows up. So now that we've created our first color style and we've called it primary, we can hop over to any other thing. Say we wanted to create a little box. You'll see that the fill is the default C4, but if we click our color styles, it shows up. We can click it and now it automatically knows, hey, give this color, give this name. And that gets really useful because if you want to change the primary color, say let's hit edit style, you can change it from, well, anything to anything, and it'll change all the other ones as well. You can see how this is going to get really useful in design. Because say your boss is like, hey, I actually want the palette to be all reds. I don't want them to be greens anymore. You're like, oh, okay, well, I can literally just change it. And as simple as that. So color styles come in really useful, and you want to integrate them into your workflow if you're using Figma a lot. Okay. Color styles are great and all, and you want to change everything. So something about Figma is every frame, every component, every object will have a fill color. Besides certain frames like auto layouts and stuff, those won't have colors. But this has a fill color, and that's our primary. And you'll notice if you're on a group, if you're on a group, you can see a selection colors tab. So this will show all the colors within that group. So you'll notice it has white because there's text in our group, and you'll notice it has green because our button is colored green. And so, say we had multiple texts in our file. So let's name this to So now we have two texts, right? So let's change this to pink or whatever. If we go here, it'll show up as well. And we can manipulate that to be whatever color we want. Then we don't have to actually click on the text. The issue with that is, okay, well, what if it's white? And we go to button, and we click on white, it changes both of them. So you have to be careful with that. You can't just go around clicking the selection colors like Kevin did. You have to be a little more aware of what you're tapping on. So let's get rid of that because we don't actually need that high. And let's change this to, well, we want it to be white, but there's a couple things here because we want to integrate color styles into our workflow. You'll notice that the surface color for this action bar is white. And while you can use surface, there's also, in CSS, there are text colors. And you can describe those with like whatever you want. But a good habit to make is to name your color styles appropriately. You can call it surface because it shares the same white as the surface of the action bar, but I prefer to simply go and call it white. But for here, let's just do text white. And so now we can apply that to any other style we want. But again, you want to keep it for text. Since we named it text white, use it for text and don't like mix and match just because it'll get messy. And if you try to change the color, it'll, change everything else. So let's change this button here to also match our color style. So we can just click the green, click the 4 dots here, which is called the style icon, and then just boom, tap tap. You'll notice that the fill here is white. So we can go ahead and just, you can call it white or you can call it surface. Kevin can go more in depth on what he prefers and what we'll be following in our Tailwind config. But for now, let's just go and do surface. We'll go with that for now. Now let's also go to our action bar. And we can change that from white to nope. Unfortunate. Hang on. Click that. We can go to the list view so we can see their actual names. We can hit surface. And you'll notice there'll be some redundancy because there's 2 whites. We don't need that. But for now, let's go with it because it'll help more when we do our CSS. Okay, so we should probably change this to primary as well. What is this? This is the outline for our search bar. So, for now we can just call this border color. So we'll make something, we'll call it border color. We'll just call it border. Color is kind of redundant here. And this, what is this? This is the text. So let's name this. We're going to create a new style and we'll call it naming stuff is the worst part. Hey, let's just do search. Text search. Let's do text gray. And something for text that I prefer, I don't prefer doing opacities, just because that's what I've been taught and what I've been reading. So let's go ahead and we can edit a color style by going into the tab. And you'll notice when you hover over it, there will be a little edit icon right here, your edit style icon. Just tap that and you can bring up the properties. Here you can change the name, you can change the description, and let's go ahead and change the opacity back to 100%. And let's change the gray to something a little closer to what it was. Somewhere about there. You could also use the border color here because they should match each other usually. But let's go ahead and try to keep it separated for now. So that is our text gray. And now if we go to our desktop, we'll notice that there is still one more. And so this color is actually our background for the tab, or sorry, for the frame. So we call this the background. You'll notice that we don't call the surfaces background because whether we have a card, whether we have some other sort of surface, those will never be the same color as the background because you always want the background to be slightly off at least, if not darker, than any of your surface colors. Just because you want your surfaces to pop and you don't want your users to feel like there's no depth to your page. So let's change that and let's go create a new style and we'll just call it background. So now this is nice. You can see all of our colors, they're nicely named, nicely organized. If we need to change something, we can do it super easily and we don't have to worry about anything. If we need palette change, boom, easy as that. Which we'll be talking about later since there's a couple of things about this palette that we'll have to discuss. Okay, so let's tackle something else. These are our buttons, but you'll notice that if we go to the actual Dribble inspiration, we see this button reused a couple times. We see it in the login, we see it as a sign up, we see it as a follow, as a solid follow, and we even see it as an Ask Others button. It seems like a lot of redundancy to just constantly create buttons, so let's do something called components. So I'm going to copy this login button, and I'm going to bring it over here. So we're in empty space, and this is where I prefer to create components because your components shouldn't be attached. Your main components should not be attached to any frame in particular. Instead, you'll have instances. So let's see what a main component is first, and then we'll tackle instances. So if you have a frame, and we have our button as our frame, if you prefer, you can change it from a frame to a group. That does affect, as you can see, you can't have a fill on a group. So let's keep it as a frame for now. And then we can right click and we can create component. And the shortcut for that is Control-Alt-K. And so now you'll notice that on the left side, we get a little component icon, which is 4 squares in like a diamond shape. So from here, we can do variants. So we're going to have at least a sign up button. So let's do, for the property, let's do sign up. And you'll notice that it changes it on the left side. So we have our default and we have our sign up. Let's go ahead and change that from default to login. And we do that by going to the actual main component. Don't rename it here, it'll throw you an error. Just go back to the main component and rename it from there. We can double click and we can do log in. And those are under our first property, and we'll go a bit more in depth than that later. So let's hit our sign up and let's change up a little bit here. So let's go to, instead of having a surface color, let's change it to primary. And let's go to text and let's change it from primary to text white. And that's so much easier than like copying over the hex color. We can just easily click it from our color styles. Color styles are an amazing option to have in your workflow. And so now that's one step, and then let's change it from login to sign up. Boom. We made our first component, and that was super simple. So let's try to implement that now. So say we had, actually no, let's just instantiate our first component. So there's a couple ways to do this. You can click on the variant, you can copy it, and you can paste it into your area. So you'll notice a few things. The icon on the left side is an instance icon, and this is just an empty diamond. And you'll notice on the right side, you can change it from login to sign up. So you don't have to constantly like go back and forth to your components. You can just bring in one instance of your main component, and then you can change it between variants there. And this speeds up your workflow in a couple ways. Not only does it eases up a bit of the CPU workload because there's only one instance of the main component, and they don't have to re-render it as a separate item. It just shows the variant over and over. But it's also just nicer to use because then if a variant changes here, let's say the text for the sign up. Actually, sorry, the text for the login. Let's change it to hello world. You'll notice that when we go over here, it's also been changed. So again, variants, super helpful. Color styles, also very helpful. So let's get rid of that change. And let's try to make our component a little nicer, because you'll notice here we have at least 5 buttons. We have a login, we have a sign up, ask others, and then 2 follows. And you can assume that the ask others will also have a solid version of itself instead of an outline version. So let's go ahead and make those. We're going to get rid of this instance. And we're going to do, let's copy that login. All right, let's start fresh. So we're going to copy our button to an empty space so it doesn't interact with any of our frames. We're going to right click and we're going to create component. From there, so this button is a outlined button. It has its text with a border color as the primary color, and then the surface is white. And the opposite of this was our sign up button, which had a filled color. And we call that a solid button. This is a outline button. And so you can see the difference in here. So this is outlined, and that's solid. And we'll be using that terminology in the next component that we do, because we're going to make this a little better. This is a little basic. So let's try again. So now that we've created our component, let's do some renaming, let's do some revamping. So this should be button. Yeah, let's go with button text for now. Give me 1 second. Alright, sorry about that. Okay, so we're going to do a couple things here. So we're going to make some variants, but we're not going to do what we did before. So we're going to go back to the main component, and we're going to rename this. So let's do, we know we at least have a couple different states. Let me see what I did here. Okay. So we know there's at least going to be a couple different properties. My bad. So we know we'll have the state of the variant. We'll have one as outlined. We'll have one as solid. So let's do that here. So this is our solid. So let's change this from surface. Let's go to primary. Let's change the text from primary to text white. And then we also need this for our sign up button. So let's do another variant. Let's call it action. Oh, wait, no, my bad. We're going to add new property, and we're going to action. So this will be log in. Oh, that's not what I meant to do. And then when we go to create a new variant, we'll be able to manipulate from there. So add new variant, we're going to do outlined, and we're going to go to the action, and we're going to hit add new. So let's do sign up. And we can understand that we're not going to be having a login that's this style choice, but bear with me. So let's do action and let's change it from login to sign up. And then let's do it again. So let's change the text and let's go sign up. Okay. And let's do one more variant. Add a new variant. Let's change the text to sign up. Let's change the color from primary to text white. And let's change the fill color to primary from surface. I just hit selection color, hang primary to text white. There we go. All right. And so now we're seeing that we can have a couple of different options, and that this will make it much easier when we have different pages, different themes. There's a lot of different possibilities here, and that's what we're going for when we start designing. And so let's look at the inspiration one more time. And so we want two buttons here. We want a follow outlined, and we want to follow filled or solid. So let's do that one more time. We're going to hit the main component, and we're going to add new variant. Add new variant. So we're going to keep it outlined, and we're going to change the action to add new, and we're going to call it follow. Nope, my bad. Rename follow. So let's go to the text. That's one, and then let's do one more. So again, go back to the main component, hit add new variant. Let's change the text to follow again. And then let's go from primary to text white, and let's go back to the variant, and let's go to the surface color, and let's change that to primary. And there we go. That's our customization for now. And then if we go back to the main component, you'll see our different actions and our different states. So some variants have the same property values applied. Oh, I didn't change this one. Let's change this from outline to solid. You can see in here the variants with their properties. Figma automatically handles that for you. I know Figma usually prefers, as a general guideline, users to do forward slashes, kind of like your folders do, but in components they seem to prefer commas. So let's change this from outlined, and let's go to solid. And you'll know this is good because when you go to Figma's guidelines, you'll see this, and this is an example of how they might style their buttons as a component. And you can see all the variants they have. So there's a default, there's a press, there's an inactive version, there's versions with icons and with no icons. There's large versions, there's small versions, and there's one with primary and secondary colors. We don't need to go this in depth yet, although you'll notice with Tailwind we will, because we'll have hover styles, disable styles, inactive, all that. But for now, I think they're pretty good. This is a nice, solid main component that we created. So now let's put it into our frame. So again, we can copy and paste the component into our frame, and that'll create an instance. We can also do Control D, and I'll duplicate it, and we can drag it over here. But the issue with that is it'll think it's still a component, or a variant, my bad. And it'll create its own component in the frame, so don't duplicate it. And then another thing we can do is, if you're on Windows, you can use Alt, and it'll duplicate it that way, and it'll still think it's an instance. If you're on Mac, you can use, I think it's Option, and it'll do the same thing. So Alt is also a really useful shortcut. Whenever you click and drag while you're holding down Alt, it'll create a duplicate. Instead of having to do Control D all the time, I prefer Alt. It's just very nice. But Let's get rid of those. Another thing to note is these style guides, the little red lines you see, they'll try to be very helpful, and usually they are. And you can also go with them by holding down Shift, and you will follow one of the axes. So if I go down while holding Shift, you'll notice it only goes up. If you're not on the action bar, hang on. Let's get out of there. So if I hold down Shift, it'll only go up, unless if I go too far, and then it'll think I'm trying to go along the other axis. Let's get rid of that. Actually, no, we should put that in our action bar. Let's drag it under our action bar. And let's replace our previous login. And if you hold down Alt while you're selecting a certain item and you hover over another item, you'll see that it brings up a little style guide with a pixel number under it. So that you can see that this login button is 8 pixels from the sign up button. And if you hover over the action bar, you'll see that the login button is 21 pixels from the top and 22 from the bottom. If you zoom out of it, you'll see that it's 189 on the side and it's 991 on the left. But that's very useful when you're doing pixel perfect prototypes. We don't need to worry too much about that now, although we can capitalize on that. And since it's an 8, we can use our arrow keys to just shift it over. Another thing you can do is you can hit Shift while you're hitting the arrow keys and it'll shift it over by 10. You can customize that number in the preferences of Figma, but it's not that big of a deal. You should usually go by 10s or go by 8s. It depends on your style guide. One more thing to note, if you do Control with the arrow keys, it will affect the size of the item, so just be careful. That's messed me up a couple of times. So let's get rid of this sign up button. Let's go back to our button and let's duplicate it. So I just hit Control D, and then we're going to hit Shift and the right arrow to just scoot it over a bunch. And then you can notice, so we can go to the right side, we can hit Action, and we can hit Sign Up. You can also access these from the Assets tab, which is in the top left. You can go to your local components, and you can just drag it onto your page. This gets a little cluttered, but it's much easier than just going all the way here, copying it, and then dragging it over to your frame. So let's fix this sign up button. I don't want the outline version, I want the solid version. And I've made a mistake, hang on. This should be Action Sign Up. I seem to have made a mistake. Hang on. So let's go back to our layers and let's go to our component. Click on the first one, we'll notice that's outline, login. Looks good. Ah, I did solid and I did sign up here. That's not right. So let's change this back to login. And let's change this one to sign up, which it is. So this is outline, sign up. This is solid, this is outline, solid. Okay. Found a bug and we already fixed it. Awesome. So let's change this back to sign up and we're looking good. Very good. All right. As you're creating your prototypes, you'll notice more and more uses. So like the inactive, the pressed buttons, you can just add those to your component and you can use them across your frames. You don't have to worry about those for now. Let's just get the basics down. So let's start with the main feed. So this is pretty big and it seems like it's going to scroll down. So we'll handle the scrolling a little later. Let's just try to get the basics. So let's create a new rectangle. Let's go about like 550. I like to have even numbers, or even large numbers. So let's do 550. And you'll notice it's 19 from the top. Let's do 30. Let's see how big this one is. Ah, this looks like about 10 pixels, honestly. Let's try to match that. So let's scoot it up by 20. Yeah, it looks pretty good. It looks a little different than theirs, but that's fine. We don't have to be an exact copy of theirs. Another shortcut, because I didn't say earlier, is if you do Control and you scroll in or out, it'll zoom in and out. And if you do Alt, it'll scroll you up, and it'll scroll you down. And if you hold down Shift, it'll scroll you left and then to the right. So those are just some more shortcuts that you should be learning along the way. Okay, so we have our rectangle, and let's rename it on the left side. And let's call this main card for now. And then let's change the fill to our surface color. Already looking good. Okay. And then let's go over here, and we can change each of the corners individually, as Kevin taught you before. But let's just go as a general focus. Let's do 16. That looks good, but I think that's more than what they wanted. Yeah, let's go a little lighter on the rounding. So let's go back here, and let's try 4. That might be a little softer than what they wanted. Oh, no, actually, that looks pretty good. All right, let's go with that. For now, just so it's a little easier to see, I'm going to change the background color to something a little darker. Yeah, we can change it back later. And then that will be our main feed. Awesome. Okay. So let's get this top part. So we're going to know that there is at least an avatar. Yeah, there's a lot of shortcuts in Figma. It's going to take a while to get used to them, but they speed up your workflow a lot. Especially in senior project, I noticed that. And you just get used to it. It's like using Control Z instead of like, or sorry, Control C and Control V to copy and paste instead of like individually typing each URL character. Okay, so let's look at the first post. We'll notice that there's a user avatar, there's a name, and then there's a topic. And then there's also a, I guess a source for the post. Let's focus on doing the avatar for the action bar. So let's, okay, yeah. So on the main card, we're going to change this to a frame. So let's try this over, and let's make a frame right here. I'm just going to follow the style guides, the little red lines, and just match it up. We're going to delete the main card, rename this frame to it. Did I just, yeah, that was the wrong thing. My bad, hang on. Frame, which is the shortcut of F, move that over, rename that to main card. And then you can change the fill for now. Sorry, I should have done surface. And then we want a radius of 4. And the frame is useful because putting the radius on the frame will round the corners of anything that's inside of it. So if I have a rectangle and I place it inside the frame, it'll cut off whatever's inside. So you'll notice it automatically rounds it, which is very useful. So let's create our action bar, or I guess more of like a title bar for the post. I guess that's about 75, maybe like 100 pixels. Let's see how even it is. So this is 62, so let's go with 75. We'll go with that. So let's change the color to surface for now, even though it blends in, that's fine. Actually, let's change this from surface to I'll change it to a pink just so you guys can see it. You should keep it as the surface color. Okay, so this will be our title bar. And then we can have, let's just start with a circle for now. I'll teach you a couple of tricks about plugins, because plugins are super useful in Figma. You'll notice I have about like 20 or 30 in here. They make your life a lot easier, and they have a lot of customization with them. So let's make this about Let's try 45. And something to note on the sizing, this little button right here constrains the proportions. So if I click that and I try to change the width to like 20, it'll also change the height to 20. Let's say I had 20 and 40 though, and then I can change the proportions. So if I try to do 40 here, it'll keep it proportional. So let's change that back and let's do 40. So it's by hitting Alt and just hovering over the title bar, it'll bring up the styling guides with the pixel numbers. So we have 14 pixels of spacing on our top, and we have 21 pixels on the bottom, and 19 on the left. So let's just make that 1 over. Yeah, and then let's scoot it down. Yeah, let's scoot it down to about that. We'll fill that in with the person later. Let's get our text in here. So post title. I prefer to use Lato, but it doesn't really matter. Lato for titles and then Arial for basic text. It just helps with accessibility concerns, and we'll go over that a little bit more too. Let's change that to be a little bigger. Let's try 24. Nah, it may be too big. Yeah, let's go with that for now. So we'll have, let's make it 15 spacing, and then, yeah, okay. So you'll notice that when I moved it down there, the style guide showed up again to let me know that, hey, you're aligned at the top with this other item, which just helps, you know, keep things even and keep things looking nice. So let's duplicate that, and let's make it a little smaller. Let's say 12. Post description. Let's double check that's what it was. No. Okay, my bad. This should be post location. And this should be post, is it postie or poster? Let's just go post person for now. Not too big of a deal. So something I'm already noticing with these colors is the black is super harsh. And there's been a couple studies done on this, but black drains the user's reading energy. There's a specific term for it. So it's recommended that you do an off black, and Tailwind actually prefers to do something a little lighter, somewhere around here. We can go more in depth about that when we actually start using Tailwind in our CSS. So let's just go a little darker. Yeah, maybe about there. So you'll notice this is much darker, but if you zoom out, you can tell, but when you're scrolling, you're not going to tell that badly, and it'll be much easier on your eyes. So let's change it to about there. And oh, guess what? We learned color styles, so we can actually make this much easier. So let's go ahead here and hit our color styles tab. Let's say create style, and let's do text. Technically speaking, we should do text primary, and I guess I'll go with that for now. But when I'm prototyping, I prefer to just do like text gray, text black, whatever. But to be a proper designer and to follow guidelines properly, let's just go with the text primary instead, and let's change that here as well. And so now if we hit the main card, we'll notice, oh well, ignoring these two, because we'll change those later, that it cuts down on what we see on the selection colors, and we can see what colors we're using more easily. So Alex says less harsh contrast. Yeah, so the color black seems to drain users' eyes a lot more. So let's see if I can bring up that. Don't use black in text. So there's a couple different studies on it, but for general understanding, normal sighted users, no one with like different eyesight, what's the word for it? For normal users, you want to stick with dark gray because it creates eye strain. And you can tell if you're still within normal boundaries for contrast by using WebAIM. WebAIM's super useful for accessibility, so if someone does have a harder time seeing the difference between colors, such as older people, you can check if your colors contrast appropriately according to, well, accessibility standards by using WebAIM. And we actually use this in our senior project, and I know Corbin actually loves this site as well. So let's go ahead and test this real quick. Let's get our text primary. Let's hit the Edit Styles button. And let's grab the hex value. And we're going to paste it into our foreground color. And you'll notice we have a contrast ratio of 14.93, which is really good. It passes all the standards. And we can even go a little lighter too. And you'll see that the lighter it is, the harder it is to pass the standards. And you can read more about that right over here. Honestly, when you're creating apps, accessibility is a really big part of it because there's screen readers, there's older people using your apps, and you want to be welcoming for everyone. You don't want to just assume that your users like you. But yeah, you want everything to be a little less harsh of a contrast color, a little less harsh on the contrast as your colors. So let's go with the darker gray for now because it creates less eye strain. And then let's go back to our dribble, and we'll notice there's a photo, and then there's the post title and the post description with a couple of tags, and then a couple of icons as well. So let's start with the photo. So I'm going to create a rectangle. And we'll say that's our photo for now, and we'll go back in a bit and we'll make an actual photo. So that is separate from our title bar, so let's grab these things, and you can highlight by clicking one on the left layers panel. You can click, okay, actually, let's try that again. So if you click an item on the layers panel, it'll highlight it in blue. If you click another one, it'll deselect the other ones, but if you're holding down Control, it'll select both of them, and you can select multiple things by holding down Control. So we hit Escape to deselect everything. And let's just hit Post Location, and we'll go back down to Title Bar, and we'll select that, but this time we'll hold down Shift, and that'll select everything in between. And from there we can hit Control G, and that'll group it. So we can say this is our title bar, which actually isn't very specific. Let's go with info bar, and we'll rename that here as well, info bar. This is technically the info bar background, but you'll notice that's kind of redundant. We don't need a background here per se when we can just change it in our group. So let's get rid of the info bar background. Let's go to our info bar group, and let's add a color to the fill, and we'll hit style, and we'll hit our surface color. Ah, well, that doesn't work very well, does it? But if we change it to a frame, let's see if that changes anything. So fill, no, it doesn't. You'll notice that it only does as much as is necessary. So let's get rid of that, and let's go back to what we had before. So let's go with that for now. There is a way around that. I'm currently forgetting, but we'll find out soon enough. All right, let's go with an action bar here. Or sorry, a description bar. Or I guess section would be a better word to say, not bar. We'll worry about the sizing in just a second. So let's say this is the post section. Let's change the fill from the default to a surface color. Is that rounded? I rounded the wrong thing. Okay, so let's change that back to 0. And let's hit the... Oh no, I did round the right thing. I'm crazy. let's drag the post section into the main card. There we go. Okay. So this gray is going to be our photo, and this post section is going to be our post section. So let's actually create a group. Let's create a frame. I'll hide the post section for now. And let's do the frame, and let's try to do a fill color. Let's do surface, and it does fill it in. Very nice. We'll try to copy our dribble. Let's do, oh boy, smoking the risk of smoke. Okay. Let's just go with something simple. So I'm going to copy this actually. So we'll select both of these. I'll use Shift to select both. I'll hop down here. I'll rename the frame one to say post section. And then let's just paste it right there. You want to give some spacing. I've noticed the most important thing when designing is actually white space. There is a point where too much white space is an issue, but generally having extra white space will always help compared to having less white space. Kind of like in a house. You'll notice when you go to a much more fancy house, they have taller rooms, they have larger doors, because the more space helps people feel a couple different emotions, but let's go with welcome for now. They feel more welcomed. So let's check our spacing. We have 8 spacing on the top, 16 on the right. Let's shift it down a little bit. We can go with 16 on both sides for now. Depending on which devices you're prototyping for, they have certain spacing guides. So on the iPhone, for example, you'd want to have 16 pixels on the left and right of your prototypes, which is just a general standard for them, but it helps. And you'll notice that people appreciate the spacing. So let's go with post title. And then I could put post description here, but I'm going to actually show you an example of how I might use a plugin. That was not the right thing. Let's do that, and that is 16 on all sides. Let's change that here. 16. Let's change that a little bit. Let's go with 10. Okay, so we want this to be a fixed size, so we're good with that. We want it to align the text at the left, and we also want to align the text at the top. So let's select everything in here, and let's go plugins. This is what I would do. And then I have the plugin lorem ipsum. So this just gives you sample text, and you'll notice with a lot of prototypes, they just do lorem ipsum as their sample text. It's just a common thing to do, kind of like how you'd use X as a variable when you're doing an example. So let's do begin with lorem ipsum, close plugin, and then I prefer to generate the perfect amount of text to fit the layers frame. So auto generate, and nice, that is a lot of text. Okay, let's double check something. So you'll notice that the text here is actually much darker than the description text. Where am I going crazy? Let's go to the dribble page just in case. No, yeah, the title does look darker than the description, so let's change that. So for the post title, so another thing to note is if you're, for example, if I had selected this, but I wanted to edit the post title, I could just hop over here, click the post title and start editing. Or if you're kind of lazy like me, you can just double click through everything and it'll go through all the sections to reach what you're double clicking. So let's go to post title, and let's change that from text primary. Let's do let's go ahead and say text primary darker, or dark. Let's create style. And then let's edit the style and let's give it a little darker of a tone. kind of an almost black. And you'll notice that it did look bolded over here. So let's go ahead and bold that on our copy. Let's change that from regular to bold. Nice. Let's go over here, and we decided that our text primary was a little too dark. So let's go ahead and edit the style. Click the hex color, and let's just drag it up a little bit. Yeah, nice. You can make that a little darker, it's up to you. Tailwind has a bunch of preset colors, and we'll go more over that, over what's preferred. When we go over to Tailwind CSS, I noticed on the Tailwind CSS site, they prefer to use, I think it was 500 or 600 for their primary text. And then for like titles, they had a little darker of a color. So let's go with this, because that's a good start. It should actually be smaller, because we're going to need space for the comments, the likes, and more. So we notice, okay, I have too much text and it's overflowing. How can I fix that? So let's see what we can do here. Okay, so what we can do is we can go to the frame and we can actually click content, and that's enabled by default. So you'll tell, or you can see if I go up, it'll automatically get rid of whatever's underneath. And that also showed up when we were rounding the corners. So let's just do that right now, and let's leave a little bit of space. Yeah, let's leave 40 for the comments, the likes, and any other icons and actions we might have. And this doesn't look too good being cut off like that, so let's also just do something here. How can I fix this? When you're in Tailwind, the best option here would be to put padding on the inside. So anything that's inside of it, it wouldn't be touching the edges. There is a way to do that in here. I've just forgotten. Oh, well, for now, let's just do this. Boop. We'll worry about that in a bit when we go to auto layouts, because those have padding and margins built in as features. Okay, so let's do a little bit of something fun. So we have an area for a photo right here. So something we can do for prototyping is we can go to a site called Unsplash. And this gives us a bunch of photos that we can use for free. I think we have to credit them, but since we're just prototyping for now, let's just grab something. And let's say sunset. This is nice. Let's do this one. So you can actually copy the image link, which will be more useful when we do Tailwind. You'll notice why. But let's just hit copy image. And then with Figma, images are a little funny. So you can have a rectangle already set up, and you'll notice if I paste it in here, it'll try to fit it in as well as it can. Or instead of doing that, you can just paste the image and then try to size it yourself. That can get a little funky. Another option is to do a mask. Let's go through that right now, just so you know the option. So get rid of that image. Let's go over here to empty space, and let's do a paste, and then let's just grab a rectangle. So I only want, actually, let's grab an ellipse. So I only want this part of the photo. What I can do is I can drag that underneath the image, and I can right click that ellipse, and I can do use as mask. And then I can drag the image into that group, and you'll notice that it cuts off everything else. Masks are super useful if you're getting more into the artistic side of prototyping, not just like how to lay everything out. And if you're an artist and you use Photoshop or something, you'll recognize masks for sure. They're extremely useful in all sorts of contexts, because you use those also when you're designing on an actual app. So when we use Tailwind and stuff, and we're using Create React App to create our desktop app, we can actually have scrollable content. And that in its own sense is a mask, because you're only seeing what's on that square and you can scroll through it. You'll see that more in probably a couple sessions, honestly. Figma takes a while. So let's just go with the basics for now. Let's double click our photo rectangle and let's just paste into it. So our options here are to go into the fill section, and then we can choose to have it fill, we can choose to have it fit, crop, and that means we can, crop it to whatever size we want, and only that part will show up. Thank you, Figma. And we can have it tile. So we can choose how big to have the tiling effect, which is nice. But usually I think we would prefer to have something fit, and then we would prefer the background to be a sort of white. So let's create a little frame right here. And then my frame made my photo smaller, which is not good. So let's grab our photo, constrain the proportions, and let's just make it a little bigger. Actually, I don't need to constrain the proportions, I think. Let's go with that. So let's go to our frame, and let's add a fill, and let's do surface. If you want, you can do a black. I'll go ahead and create another surface color. Let's do that. Let's call it surface. Surface dark. Let's change that from surface to surface dark. Let's edit that style and let's make it a little darker. Or just straight black, that's fair. But you'll notice that if you're on a themed website, you can change it between different color styles. So if I had another version of this frame, I could have it from white to black to whatever color I think would match more. AI edit color black. I think the best color here would be white. We can have it match our background, but that looks a little funky. So let's just keep it as surface for now. Actually, in fact, just so it looks prettier, even though you should have it as fit, let's go to our photo and let's change it to fill. I actually cropped it because I think it looks nicer. You don't need to worry about that. That's just an artistic thing that I prefer to do. But usually with whatever the user gives you, you'd want to fit whatever photo is given so they can get as much of it in view so other people can see their post. So let's call that photo. And let's rename this to post because we don't need section there. So that's looking not exactly similar, but pretty similar so far. So let's go ahead and try adding an avatar here. So what we did is we did unsplash, which is useful. You can go to unsplash, you can just go here and look up random guy. And it'll show this, and you can crop it, you can just steal a bit of it, doesn't matter. Another thing about Figma that I like is we can go here, select our circle, and there's a plugin called, I think it's avatars. Yeah, and it'll just pick a random avatar for us. That speeds up our workflow because we're not worrying about the details. The actual app developers can worry about the avatars, the photos, whatever. We're just worrying about speeding up our workflow and producing prototypes as fast as we can. And you'll notice that the avatar kind of blends in with the background, which I don't prefer. Technically, that is what the dribble inspiration does. I would prefer to put an outline, and let me just show you how to do that. So we can go here and we can hit stroke. Now we'll add a little bit of a outline to our avatar. You can change the width of it by increasing it right here. And it goes inside, and you'll notice that we can change that by hitting outside, for example. And now force our stroke to go outside. Or we can do center. I think in here the best case would be to do inside. Let's just make that a little less obvious. You can manually change the number, but you can also hover over the icon of the width, and then you can just drag left and right to raise and lower it. Let's change that stroke color to something a little less terrifying. So, border, that's a little less harsh on the eyes. Another thing you could do, depending on how you want to style it, is to do an effect. So we can click a plus right here, and we'll notice there's immediately a drop shadow, which looks really cool. But don't overuse the shadows. Kind of like how a lot of sites used to overuse the gradients when they first started. Drop shadows are usually the same. Go try to use them sparingly. Use them on buttons, use them on cards. But if you do, don't use them so harshly. Like, this is super noticeable. And what you can do is you can click on the drop shadow and click the icon next to it, and you can change the positioning. So I can make this like 15, and you'll notice it goes super far down. You can change the opacity, so I can make this 100. And you can change all sorts of options about it. Another useful thing about Figma is there's a plugin, another plugin called Shadow Picker. And so you can select your ellipse, and you can do a shadow size of base, medium, large, whatever. Let's try a medium here. Ah, it did not show up. That is unfortunate. Maybe it's because... No. Okay. Well, let's not worry about that for now. But you can do shadows, and you can make them very nice. Let's get rid of these. And another thing about effects is you'll notice there's an inner shadow. There's an inner shadow, a drop shadow, layer blur, and background blur. So for example, layer blur blurs the actual image, and background blur will blur whatever's behind that image. And if we scroll up here to our dribble inspiration, you'll notice that it kind of does that right here. The green circle becomes extremely blurred behind the main page. So we could do that for our background if we want to mock or mimic the dribble inspiration, but let's keep it simple and let's not do that. And then for the avatar, let's just not have an effect. Let's not keep the stroke either, just to match our inspiration. Okay, this color also needs to change. This should be text primary dark, and then they can have their post location. It does look a little harsh on the eyes just because it's so thin. Yeah, this one looks a little nicer. It is also smaller, so let's try to do that. So let's make this, instead of 18, let's do 14. Instead of 12, no, let's keep 12 for now. So this is 20 from the top, and the avatar is 17 from the top. So that means we have a 3 pixel difference. We have 4 pixel difference here. So let's just scoot this down by 2. Scoot this up by 2. Yeah, let's go with that. Wonder what happens if we do stroke here. Ah, let's not do that. Very good. Okay, so that's the basic. Oh, we don't like that spacing actually. Hang on. 1, 2. Yeah. You notice the style guides just showed up there for a second to say, hey, you are pretty symmetrical across across this point. So it knew that, hey, half the avatar is here, half the avatar is up here, and then these are equidistant as well as the pixels above and below them. So let's go with that for now. our post title, our post description, and then we also need, yeah, we should do tags as well. Okay, so let's have another thing. We're running a little low on time, so let me see if I can scoot this up. I'm going to delete this sentence. You can also mask it by just doing another rectangle and just placing it above it. So for example, doing that, let's just select white for now. And then since it's above our text on the hierarchy in the layers panel, it'll overlay it. And so that acts as a mask. So if we do this and we drag it up, oh no, sorry. Select the rectangle and we want to constrain it to the bottom. And then, yeah, okay. So then it'll just automatically mock padding in a sense. So let's go with that for now, that's fine. And then here, let's do a, oh, okay. We are starting to get a little cluttered, so let's scoot that down. And then let's do another frame. Let's scoot it up, scoot it to the right. And then our main card is 550. So let's do width of 550. Let's change the fill to surface color. And then let's just add our tags. So our tags are similar to our buttons, but they are smaller. So let's not use the variants that we had before. And let's just create them here. Let's do a rectangle, pop it down right here. Let's round the edges to about, I'm gonna go with the 12. We'll get rid of the fill. Actually, we can do a fill of surface, even though I guess transparent would also work, since the surface behind it is white. Let's do a stroke, and let's do primary. We can make that even smaller and do a 0.5, but what we should do is keep it as a 1, and then just make it larger. Spacing's off, so let's do that. And I'll just make it a little bit bigger. Yeah. Let's get that over, and then let's add some text. And let's do hashtag sunset. Let's make it a little small. Let's do 8. Let's hit escape, and then let's place that in the middle. There we go. Okay. And change the fill to primary, and then let's group these two. So we select both with Shift or Control, and you hit Control G to group it. And let's just say that's our sunset tag. Actually, let's just call it sunset for now. Okay, that is 1. Let's see if it looks like theirs. Ah, they preferred to capitalize. Yeah, let's do that. That's fine. Their strokes actually look thinner than ours, but that's okay. I'm going to make this a little smaller, so let's go with the height of 10. And then I'll make the post just a little more. We'll scoot this up. And that looks a little nicer. We should scoot this to the right because this one's padding is 16. So let's keep that same left edge padding and let's scoot it over by 6. Okay, nice. And then something we can do here is let's duplicate it. So we have another sunset, and let's just scoot that over. Let's do a padding of 8. And then, again, we're going to duplicate it more, but Figma's very nice about this. If you duplicate an object that's similar to its previous object, and there's spacing in between, it'll try to keep that spacing. So, I don't think it'll work because I already moved the spacing, but if I do Control D and I scoot it over, and then I do it again, Control D, it'll start to scoot itself over, and it'll keep the spacing. This is to help your workflow speed up, but we don't need that many tags, so let's get rid of a few. And then another thing we can do is we can select all of them. So let's go into the Layers panel, and let's use Shift to select all. And then you'll notice, if you scroll in, that there are these lines. So these lines indicate the spacing in between each item. And this one lets you, say if this wasn't sunset and this was like waves. Very good. You can grab the little purple circle that appears and you can reposition it. And then if I want to increase the spacing, no, I can just wait for that purple line to show up and I can increase or decrease. Let's keep it at 8 though. And then another thing to note is when you're using Figma and you're dealing with groups of items like this, a little icon will show up here with 3 rectangles, and it'll also let you reposition the spacing in between items. But I don't have multiple columns or multiple rows, so it's not going to throw that at me. Okay, so we do have tags. They're the same thing over and over, which does kind of feel redundant, but that's okay, because there's too many options there, so we can't really do a variant. So we can just do examples for now, etc., etc. I'm not going to rename all of them. Let's just go with that. Okay, so that's tags. And then let's do one last thing. Oh, we do need to show more button. Yeah, let's do that first. So we're going to hop into our tag, and let's just call it tags. We're going to hit text and we're going to do show more. Hit escape to exit out of that, and then we're going to change the fill color to text primary because we love text primary. Check the spacing. I prefer to have extra spacing on the top. You'll notice that Figma thinks it's already centered, but I'm going to scoot it up one. Because it's always nicer to have, if you have uneven spacing, it's nicer to have the extra spacing on the bottom. So let's just keep that there. Yeah, that shouldn't be there technically because it's not overflowing, but we'll go with it for now. And we were supposed to capitalize it. That's fine. Okay. The last thing we need to do is the comments and stuff. We are over time though, so I think I'll just leave that. But I will set it up. So let's do a frame. Size it appropriately. So let's zoom in, go left. We're going to fill it with the color surface. And then let's rename it and let's call it, I can't call it action bar. Interactions. Very good. Okay. So, no, we'll end it there, but I want to show one last thing. So Figma has plenty of options. So when you load up your Figma, it'll load up a page similar to this. This is the desktop app. And then you can hit here, which is community. And it'll take you to way too many options. And you can just hop up here and you can search the community. So let's say Kevin showed us the hero icons. So let's type in hero icons. And you'll notice that a couple of files show up. Very good. We can hit plugins because those are all the files. You can hit plugins and even creators will show up. So this is the plugin I prefer to use for hero icons. It's Very simple, very nice, and that's all we need it to do. So we can just hit the Figma button in the top left, which is the main menu button. We can hover over plugins, scroll down, and hit hero icons. And then we can hit like a comment. Ooh, no. Let's do a thumbs up button. So if you click it, it'll automatically import it into your project. Something to note is it'll have the vector inside of a frame. That frame is good and you should keep it because when you work with vectors in Tailwind or anywhere else, they have the option of view boxes. And that allows you to have extra spacing on your icon. So usually in our app, we'll be using view boxes of 0, 0, 24, 24. And that lets us, as you can see, have a width and height of 24. And that's just good because, again, padding is very important, and you'll start to see why. Our tags actually look kind of small in comparison, so we could make this smaller, and we can do that for now. But I think next time we'll have to go back and make the tags a little bigger because they seem way too small in comparison to our text. But we'll do that next time. All right. Thank you for joining. Hopefully this wasn't too bad. Alex, don't you dare bring up Among Us. I've got too much PTSD from those memes. So, all right. Very good. We'll work more on this next time, and I think Kevin might take over next time, depending on how much work he has, actually. Good for him for getting a job. Hopefully we all get there. All right. Thanks, guys. Have a good day.